I heard my nephew's voice from the dining room, loud and boastful. Aunt Margaret finally signed over power of attorney to me. It was almost too easy. My hand froze on the doorknob. I'd only stepped away to use the restroom during our family dinner. Now, standing in the hallway of my own home, I couldn't move. "How'd you manage that?" It was my neighbor Ron's voice. He joined us for Sunday dinner, as he often did since his wife passed. "Please," Bradley laughed. "She's 73 and can barely see her computer screen. I just told her they were updated beneficiary forms for her insurance. She signs anything I put in front of her these days." The wineglass I was holding slipped from my fingers and shattered on the hardwood floor. The conversation in the dining room stopped abruptly. "Aunt Margaret?" Bradley called out, his voice suddenly sweet and concerned. "Everything okay?" I couldn't answer. My throat had closed up, and my heart hammered against my ribs. Insurance papers. That's what he told me 3 days ago when he'd stopped by with his laptop and portable printer. I'd signed at least 4 documents while he pointed to the signature lines. Bradley had been handling my finances since Harold died 5 years ago. I'd trusted him completely. I forced myself to breathe, to think. Bradley appeared in the hallway, alarm on his face quickly replaced by something else when he saw me standing there, glass shards around my slippered feet. "Careful there, Aunt Margaret." He stepped forward, taking my elbow. "Let me help you. We don't want you cutting yourself." His touch made my skin crawl now, but I allowed him to guide me away from the broken glass. I needed time to think, to plan. More than that, I needed to know exactly what I'd signed. "Clumsy me," I murmured, patting his hand. "Must have been the second glass of wine." "You know what the doctor said about mixing alcohol with your blood pressure medication," Bradley scolded gently, and I nodded like the confused old woman he believed me to be. Over his shoulder, I caught Ron's eye. The deep furrow in his brow told me he'd heard the same conversation I had. A silent understanding passed between us. "Why don't you sit down and I'll clean this up," Bradley said, easing me into a chair at the dining table. "Such a good nephew," I said, watching him carefully. Bradley was 45, my late sister's only child. When Harold died, leaving me with a mortgage-free home, healthy investments, and a substantial life insurance payout, Bradley had stepped in to help with the finances. I'd been grateful then, overwhelmed by grief and paperwork. "I'll get the broom," Ron said, pushing back from the table. He knew where I kept everything. He'd been a fixture in our lives for 20 years, Harold's best friend before becoming mine. As Bradley swept up the glass, his phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket, glanced at the screen, and his face lit up. "Good news?" I asked mildly. "Just work," he said, but the smile lingered as he pocketed the phone. "Now, how about some coffee to go with dessert? I brought your favorite cheesecake from Mancini's." Through dessert, I played my part the slightly forgetful, grateful aunt while my mind raced. Bradley had been handling all my finances for years. I'd given him access to my accounts to pay bills and manage investments, but power of attorney? That would give him control over everything: my house, my medical decisions, my entire life. After dinner, Bradley lingered, insisting on washing dishes and setting up my medications for the week. Ron stayed too, unusually quiet. "You don't have to do all this," I told Bradley as he organized my pill containers. "It's no trouble, Aunt Margaret. Someone has to look after you." His tone was affectionate, but his words cut deep. I'd been a mathematics professor for 35 years before retiring. I'd filed my own taxes, managed a household, and put myself through graduate school. Now he acted like I couldn't function without him. "I thought I was doing pretty well," I said carefully. "Of course you are," he said with a patronizing smile. "But you know how forgetful you've been lately. Remember last month when you couldn't find your checkbook?" The checkbook I later discovered in Bradley's desk drawer when I was looking for stamps. I'd assumed I'd left it there myself. Yes, I remember, I said quietly. When they finally left, I locked the door and leaned against it, trembling with anger and fear. I needed to know what I'd signed, but more importantly, I needed help. I reached for the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Julia, it's Margaret. I'm sorry to call so late, but I need your help. Julia Chen had been my student 25 years ago and was now one of the most respected estate attorneys in the city. She was also my friend. Margaret, what's wrong? Her voice was instantly alert. I think my nephew tricked me into signing a power of attorney, I said, the words bitter in my mouth. I need to know what I'm dealing with, and then I need to fix it. There was a brief silence. Come to my office tomorrow at 9. Don't call Bradley. Don't let him know you suspect anything. And Margaret, bring any financial statements you can find. That night, I barely slept. I crept down to my home office and searched for recent financial statements, but the filing cabinet where I'd kept them was nearly empty. The computer showed my banking password had been changed. A sick feeling settled in my stomach as I realized how methodically Bradley had been cutting me off from my own finances. I did find insurance statements and some investment summaries that came quarterly through the mail. Bradley must have missed them. I slipped them into my tote bag for tomorrow. At 7 the next morning, there was a soft knock at my back door. It was Ron, holding a cardboard tray with 2 coffees. Thought you might need this, he said, handing me a cup. And I wanted to check on you after what we heard last night. I let him in, grateful for the company. I'm meeting with my attorney this morning. Ron nodded. Good. I've never trusted that nephew of yours, Margaret. Too slick by half. He hesitated. I should have said something sooner, but last month I saw him coming out of your house when you were at your book club. He said he was dropping off groceries, but he didn't have anything with him. A chill ran through me. Did you tell me that at the time? Ron looked away. I meant to, but then you mentioned he had a key to check on things, so I thought. I didn't want to worry you if it was nothing. It's not your fault, I assured him, though I felt another wave of violation. But I need to get to the bottom of this. Do you want me to drive you to the attorney's? Ron offered. I don't mind. No, I said firmly. I need to do this myself. But, thank you. Julia's office was in a sleek downtown building that made me feel underdressed in my sensible slacks and cardigan. But her warm hug when I arrived dispelled any discomfort. Professor, she said, using her old name for me, come in, tell me everything. I explained about the documents Bradley had presented as updated beneficiary forms, the conversation I'd overheard, and my growing realization of how he'd been isolating me from my finances. Julia took notes, her expression growing more troubled. We need to find out exactly what you signed. I can submit a records request to the county clerk, but that will take time. Did Bradley give you copies of anything? I shook my head. He said he'd file them and get me copies later. Convenient, Julia muttered. She looked up from her notes. Margaret, I need to ask, has Bradley been suggesting you're having memory problems, cognitive issues? The question stung. Yes, he makes comments about me being forgetful, confused. He even told my doctor I was having memory issues during my last checkup. Julia's expression hardened. Classic isolation and gaslighting tactics. He's building a case that you're not competent to manage your affairs. But I am competent, I insisted, my voice sharper than I intended. I know that, Julia said gently. Anyone who spends 5 minutes talking to you knows that. But Bradley is creating a paper trail suggesting otherwise. She turned to her computer and typed rapidly. The good news is, even if you did sign a power of attorney, we can revoke it. The fact that he obtained it through deception makes it legally questionable anyway. What do I do now? I asked. First, we file a new power of attorney naming someone you actually trust, not Bradley. Then, we send formal notification to all financial institutions revoking any previous powers of attorney. Can we freeze my accounts in the meantime? Julia nodded approvingly. Exactly what I was going to suggest. We should also change all your passwords and notify your bank of potential fraud. She paused. Margaret, depending on what we find, we may need to consider legal action against Bradley. The thought of taking my own nephew to court made my stomach clench, but I nodded. I understand. Good. Now who do you want to name as your new power of attorney? It should be someone you trust implicitly. I considered this. My friends were all my age or older. My other relatives lived out of state. What about you? I asked finally. Julia looked surprised, then touched. I'd be honored, but are you sure? This is a significant responsibility. I trust you, I said simply. You've always been honest with me, even when it wasn't what I wanted to hear. Julia smiled. Then I accept. Let's draw up the paperwork now. Over the next 2 hours, we created a new durable power of attorney naming Julia as my agent. We also drafted letters to my bank, investment firms, and insurance companies, revoking any previous authorizations given to Bradley. What happens when Bradley finds out? I asked as we finished. Julia's expression was grim. He won't be happy, but legally, he'll have no recourse if you're clearly competent, which you are. I left Julia's office with copies of the new documents and a plan. First stop, my bank, where I changed all my passwords, ordered new checks and cards, and placed alerts on my accounts. The bank manager was horrified when I explained the situation and promised to flag any unusual activity. Next, I went to the cell phone store to change my phone number and set up new email accounts. No more would Bradley have access to my digital life. By afternoon, I was exhausted but satisfied with our progress. Julia had filed the paperwork and sent official notifications. Now came the harder part, confronting Bradley. I decided to wait until I had proof of what he'd done. Julia promised to have copies of whatever documents he'd filed within a few days. That evening, my doorbell rang. Bradley stood on my porch, holding a paper bag. Brought you some dinner from that Italian place you like, he said, smiling. I let him in, maintaining my usual demeanor. How thoughtful, you didn't have to do that. Just looking out for you. He set the bag on the kitchen counter. How was your day? Quiet, I lied. Just read my book and watch some television. Bradley nodded, glancing around the kitchen. Did you take your medication? I can get your pills. Already took them, I said. I'm not completely helpless, you know. A flash of something annoyance crossed his face before his smile returned. Of course not. I just worry. He stayed for an hour, asking casual questions about my plans for the week, who I'd spoken to recently. I realized now he was monitoring me, gathering information. When he finally left, promising to check in tomorrow, I locked the door and leaned against it, trembling with anger. The next 3 days followed a similar pattern. Bradley called or stopped by daily, his concern increasingly transparent as surveillance. I played along, giving vague answers about my activities while secretly working with Julia to uncover the extent of his deception. On Thursday, Julia called. We have copies of the documents, she said without preamble. Margaret, it's worse than we thought. He filed for both financial and medical power of attorney, claiming you're in the early stages of dementia. He even got a statement from Dr. Winters supporting this claim. My blood ran cold. Dr. Winters was my longtime physician. That's impossible. I just had my annual physical 3 months ago. He said I was in excellent health. According to this, you had a follow-up visit 6 weeks ago where you exhibited concerning cognitive decline. I never had that appointment, I said, my voice shaking. I figured as much, Julia said grimly. I think Bradley either convinced Dr. Winters you were examined when you weren't, or he paid him off. What do we do now? Now we fight back. I've scheduled a cognitive assessment for you tomorrow with an independent geriatric specialist, Dr. Patel. Her evaluation will be crucial evidence. The next day, I spent 3 hours with Dr. Patel, completing various memory and cognitive tests. She was thorough and kind, explaining each assessment. "Mrs. Harmon," she said when we finished, "based on my evaluation, you show no signs of cognitive impairment whatsoever. Your memory and executive function are excellent for a person of any age, let alone 73. Relief flooded through me. "Will you put that in writing?" "Absolutely. I understand the situation from Attorney Chen, and I'll provide a comprehensive report." Armed with Dr. Patel's evaluation and copies of the fraudulent documents, Julia and I formulated our plan. We would confront Bradley, but not alone. Julia suggested we meet at her office with her paralegal present as a witness. I had a different idea. "No, I want to do this at my house, on my terms." Julia looked uncertain. "Are you sure? My office provides a more controlled environment." "I'm sure," I said firmly. "Bradley manipulated me in my own home. That's where I want to confront him." Reluctantly, Julia agreed. We set the meeting for Sunday afternoon, when Bradley typically came for dinner. Julia would arrive first, and we'd have the evidence ready. That Saturday, Bradley called. "Aunt Margaret, I need you to sign some more paperwork. Nothing major, just some updates to your accounts." My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady. "Of course. Why don't you bring them tomorrow when you come for dinner?" "Great," he said, sounding pleased. "See you around 4?" "Perfect," I replied. I spent that night rehearsing what I would say, how I would maintain my composure when facing the nephew who had betrayed me so completely. By morning, I felt calm, my anger transformed into cold resolve. Julia arrived at 3, carrying her briefcase and a supportive smile. "Are you ready for this?" "More than ready," I said. We spread the evidence on my dining table, copies of the fraudulent power of attorney, Dr. N. Patel's assessment, bank statements showing withdrawals Bradley had made, and the new power of attorney naming Julia. At precisely 4 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Aunt Margaret," Bradley said, smiling. He held a folder in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. The smile faltered when he saw Julia standing behind me. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company." "Come in, Bradley," I said, stepping aside. "This is Julia Chen. She's my attorney." His face paled slightly, but he recovered quickly. "Attorney, what's going on?" "Let's sit down," I suggested, leading him to the dining room where our evidence lay spread across the table. Bradley's eyes darted over the documents, and I saw the moment he recognized what they were. His shoulders stiffened and the congenial mask slipped. "What is this?" he asked, his voice hard. "I think you know exactly what this is," I replied, my own voice steady. "These are copies of the power of attorney documents you tricked me into signing. The ones you claimed were insurance beneficiary forms." Bradley glanced between Julia and me, calculation evident in his eyes. "Aunt Margaret, you're confused. I never." "Don't," I cut him off. "I heard you, Bradley. Last Sunday, during dinner, you were bragging to Ron about how easily you'd manipulated me." He tried to laugh it off. "You must have misunderstood. We were talking about... We also have bank records." Julia interjected smoothly, sliding a document toward him. "Showing withdrawals you've made from Mrs. Pry. Harmon's accounts over the past 3 months totaling $27,000. Bradley's face flushed. "I manage her finances. Those were legitimate expenses." "For what?" I demanded. My property taxes for the entire year aren't even $5,000. My monthly expenses haven't changed in years. Investment opportunities, he said quickly. I've been growing your portfolio. Julia pulled out another document. Interesting, because according to these statements, her investment accounts have decreased by nearly $40,000 since you took over. Bradley's expression hardened. This is ridiculous. Aunt Margaret clearly isn't thinking clearly. She's been having memory problems for months. Her own doctor confirmed it. Ah, yes, Dr. Winters. I nodded. The appointment I supposedly had 6 weeks ago, where he diagnosed me with early-stage dementia. Bradley's eyes narrowed. You don't remember it because of your condition. Or because it never happened. I countered. Julia checked with Dr. Winter's office. There's no record of that appointment in their system, only a letter he supposedly wrote after a consultation. This is absurd, Bradley snapped, standing up. I've done nothing but help you, and this is how you repay me, by accusing me of, what? Fraud? Yes, I said simply. Fraud, deception, and elder abuse. The doorbell rang again. That would be my other guests, I said. Julia went to answer the door. Ron entered first, followed by a woman in a police uniform and a man in a suit who introduced himself as Detective Harris from the Financial Crimes Unit. Bradley's face went ashen. What is this? Mrs. Harmon has filed a formal complaint, Detective Harris explained, setting his briefcase on a chair. We're investigating allegations of elder financial abuse and fraud. This is a family misunderstanding, Bradley insisted, his voice rising. My aunt is confused. She has dementia. Actually, Julia said, sliding Dr. O. Patel's report across the table. According to this comprehensive cognitive assessment performed yesterday, Mrs. Harmon shows no signs of impairment whatsoever. Her cognitive function is exceptional. Detective Harris turned to Bradley. Sir, we'd like to ask you some questions about the power of attorney documents and certain financial transactions. Bradley's eyes darted to the door. Ron moved slightly, blocking the exit. I don't have to talk to you, Bradley said, his voice shaking. I want my lawyer. That's your right, Detective Harris acknowledged. But we have a warrant to search your residence and seize your financial records. He produced an envelope from his jacket. We can do this at the station if you prefer. Bradley sank into a chair, the fight visibly draining from him. Aunt Margaret, he pleaded, you can't seriously believe I would steal from you, after everything I've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Bradley? I asked quietly. Besides, isolate me from my finances, attempt to declare me incompetent, and steal tens of thousands of dollars. I've been taking care of you. No, I corrected him. You've been taking advantage of me. There's a difference. Detective Harris cleared his throat. Mr. Nichols, we can continue this conversation at the station. Please gather your things. As the detective led Bradley toward the door, my nephew turned back. This isn't over, he said, his face twisted with anger. You have no idea what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing, I replied. For the first time in years, I'm taking back control of my life. After they left, Ron squeezed my shoulder. You were magnificent, Margaret. I wasn't feeling magnificent. I felt drained and sad. Despite everything Bradley had done, he was still my sister's son. Family. He's been planning this for years, Julia said, gathering the documents. The bank records show small withdrawals dating back to when Harold first died, gradually increasing over time. I trusted him completely, I murmured. I gave him access to everything because I thought he cared about me. Ron shook his head. Some people see vulnerability and want to help. Others see it and want to exploit. I'm not vulnerable, I said sharply. Of course not, Julia said quickly. That's Bradley's narrative, not ours. But the truth was more complicated. Grief had made me vulnerable after Harold died. I'd been grateful for Bradley's help, relieved to have someone handle the financial details while I processed my loss. I'd handed over access and information without question because he was family. What happens now? I asked Julia. The police will investigate. Based on the evidence, Bradley will likely face charges of fraud and financial elder abuse. You'll need to provide a formal statement. And my finances? We've already revoked his power of attorney and notified all your financial institutions. I've frozen the accounts he had access to and will open new ones. It will take time to determine exactly how much he took and whether we can recover any of it. The reality of my situation settled heavily on my shoulders. I should have been more careful. No, Ron said firmly. This isn't your fault, Margaret. Bradley betrayed your trust. That's on him, not you. The next few weeks were a blur of police interviews, financial forensics, and legal proceedings. Julia helped me establish new accounts, change all my passwords, and create a comprehensive financial plan. We discovered Bradley had taken nearly $120,000 over 5 years, most of it in the past 18 months as his scheme accelerated. The investigation revealed more than financial abuse. Bradley had been systematically isolating me from friends and family, screening my calls and discouraging visits. He'd even intercepted mail and emails, ensuring I remained dependent on him for information and connection. Dr. Winters eventually admitted that he'd never examined me for cognitive decline. Bradley had pressured him into writing the letter, leveraging a past indiscretion involving prescription irregularities. The doctor surrendered his medical license rather than face formal charges. Throughout it all, I struggled with conflicting emotions. Anger at Bradley's betrayal warred with grief for the relationship I thought we had. Some days I questioned whether I'd done the right thing by involving the police. Other days, reviewing the extent of his deception, I wondered if I'd waited too long. 3 months after that confrontation in my dining room, I sat in the county courthouse, waiting to testify at Bradley's hearing. He'd been charged with multiple counts of fraud, financial elder abuse, and forgery. The prosecutor believed the case was strong enough that Bradley would likely accept a plea deal rather than risk trial. Julia sat beside me, reviewing her notes. "Are you ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I said. The courtroom doors opened, and Bradley entered with his attorney. He looked thinner, his usual confidence diminished. When he saw me, he quickly looked away. "Mrs. Harmon," a young woman approached us. "I'm Alicia Diaz from the district attorney's office. There's been a development. Mr. Nichols has agreed to a plea deal." "What kind of deal?" I asked. "He'll plead guilty to 2 counts of fraud and 1 count of financial elder abuse. In exchange, we're recommending a sentence of 5 years, with 3 years suspended. He'll serve a minimum of 2 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of probation. He'll also be required to make full restitution." "Will he be able to pay back what he took?" Julia asked. Alicia nodded. "We've located most of the funds. He invested in real estate using your money, Mrs. Harmon. The properties will be liquidated to repay you." I sat with this information, watching Bradley whisper urgently to his attorney, "Will I need to testify?" "Only a victim impact statement if you choose to make one," Alicia explained. "The judge will want to hear how his actions affected you before accepting the plea and determining the final sentence." An hour later, I stood before the judge, acutely aware of Bradley sitting just feet away. The courtroom was quiet as I unfolded the paper where I'd written my statement. "Your Honor, my name is Margaret Harmon. I'm 73 years old and a retired mathematics professor. The defendant, Bradley Nichols, is my nephew. When my husband died 5 years ago, Bradley offered to help me manage my finances while I grieved. I trusted him completely. He was family." I paused, gathering myself. "Over time, he took advantage of that trust. He stole my money, isolated me from friends, and attempted to have me declared incompetent by falsifying medical records." But what Bradley stole from me was more than money. He stole my independence, my confidence, and my sense of security in my own home. I looked directly at Bradley for the first time. He stared at the table in front of him. Bradley assumed that at my age, I would be too confused, too afraid, or too embarrassed to fight back. He underestimated me because of my age. He's not the first person to make that mistake, but he's the first family member to do so. The judge, a woman perhaps 10 years younger than me, nodded slightly. The financial loss can be calculated and repaid. The breach of trust is harder to quantify. How do you measure the cost of discovering that someone you loved and trusted has been plotting against you for years? How do you calculate the value of dignity? I folded my paper, having said what mattered most. I don't wish Bradley harm. I wish he had made different choices. I wish he had seen me as a person worthy of respect, rather than an opportunity for exploitation. Most of all, I wish other older adults who face similar betrayals find the strength and support to stand up for themselves, as I have done today. The judge thanked me and turned to Bradley, asking if he wished to address the court. He stood slowly. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely audible. "I never meant for it to go so far." "Mr. Nichols," the judge said, "intent matters in law, but so do actions. Your systematic exploitation of your aunt's trust was not a momentary lapse in judgment, but a sustained campaign of deception and abuse." She accepted the plea deal but added a condition. In addition to restitution, Bradley would be required to complete 400 hours of community service working with elderly populations after his release. "Perhaps," she said, "direct service to those you've exploited by proxy will provide the perspective you clearly lack." As the court adjourned, Bradley was led away by officers. He glanced back once, his expression unreadable. I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness and, surprisingly, relief. It was over. Outside the courthouse, Julia hugged me. "How are you feeling?" "Lighter," I said, realizing it was true. "Like I can breathe again." "The financial recovery process will take time," she cautioned. "But we've made excellent progress. The house and car titles are solely in your name, your new accounts are secure, and your financial plan is in place." "And I have a power of attorney I can actually trust," I added, squeezing her hand. 6 months later, I sat on my patio with Ron, enjoying the spring sunshine. My garden was coming back to life after winter, new growth emerging from the soil. "Have you heard from Bradley?" Ron asked, sipping his coffee. "His attorney sent a letter," I said. "He's eligible for work release soon. Apparently, he's been a model prisoner." "Does that change how you feel about everything?" I considered this. "No. I'm glad he's doing well, but that doesn't erase what happened." "Do you regret pressing charges?" "Sometimes I regret the necessity of it," I admitted, "but not the decision itself. Bradley needed consequences, and I needed justice." Ron nodded. "You've changed, you know, since all this happened." "How so?" "You're more formidable," he said with a smile. "Not that you weren't always impressive, Margaret, but there's a confidence now, a certainty about you." I laughed. "Is that a polite way of saying I've become a difficult old woman?" "Not difficult, determined. It suits you." Perhaps he was right. The experience had changed me. I joined an elder advocacy group sharing my story to help others recognize and respond to financial abuse. I'd become more vigilant about my affairs, but also more engaged with my community. The isolation Bradley had engineered had been replaced by new connections and renewed purpose. Julia had encouraged me to create a comprehensive estate plan, including a living will and healthcare directive. "No more surprises," she'd said, and I'd agreed wholeheartedly. My financial affairs were now organized and transparent, managed with my active participation rather than handed off to someone else. Later that afternoon, I received a call from Alicia Diaz at the district attorney's office. Mrs. Harmon, I wanted to update you personally. The last of Bradley's properties has been sold, and the funds have been transferred to the restitution account. With this payment, you've recovered approximately 90% of the stolen funds. Thank you for letting me know, I said. There's one more thing, Alicia continued. Bradley has requested permission to write to you. As his victim, you have the right to refuse contact. I paused, surprised by the request. What does he want to say? He didn't specify. We can deny the request, or we can approve it with a condition that all correspondence is screened by our office first. I thought about it. Approve it with screening. I can't promise I'll read whatever he sends, but he should have the opportunity to write. After the call, I walked through my garden, considering this new development. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear from Bradley, but closing that door completely felt wrong. People could change. I had. The following week, a letter arrived from the district attorney's office. Bradley's handwriting was familiar on the envelope inside the official mailing. I set it on my desk, not yet ready to read it. Instead, I called Julia. Are you free for lunch tomorrow? I'd like to discuss something. Of course, she said. Everything okay? Yes. I assured her. I've been thinking about creating a foundation something to help educate older adults about financial security and provide resources for those who've experienced exploitation. That's a wonderful idea, Julia said warmly. We could start with a workshop series. Exactly what I was thinking. I may have retired from teaching, but I still have plenty to offer. As I hung up, I glanced at Bradley's unopened letter. Whatever it contained, remorse, excuses, or more manipulation, it was part of my past. My focus now was on the future, on transforming my experience into something that might help others. I'd learned painful lessons about trust and vigilance, but also about resilience and self-advocacy. Bradley had underestimated me because of my age. He'd seen only vulnerability where there was also strength, only confusion where there was clarity. It was a common mistake, assuming that gray hair signaled a diminished capacity for self-determination. I smiled, remembering the judge's face when I delivered my victim impact statement, the recognition in her eyes, the subtle nod acknowledging our shared understanding of what it meant to be underestimated. The next morning, I met with the director of the senior center about hosting financial literacy workshops. She embraced the idea enthusiastically. We need this, she said. So many of our members have experienced financial pressure from family members. They often don't know their rights or how to protect themselves. I didn't, I admitted, but I learned. The hard way, she said sympathetically. The necessary way, I corrected her. And now I can help others avoid the same pitfalls. As I left the senior center, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Bradley had intended to diminish me, to reduce me to dependence and confusion. Instead, his actions had led me to this new chapter where my experience and hard-won wisdom could make a meaningful difference. I stopped at my favorite coffee shop, ordered a cappuccino, and took out my notebook. I had a foundation to plan, workshops to design, and a future to embrace. The barista, a young woman with brightly colored hair, delivered my coffee with a smile. Can I get you anything else, ma'am? No, thank you, I said, opening my notebook to a fresh page. I have everything I need. I began to write, my pen moving swiftly across the paper, mapping out this new journey. Bradley had underestimated me once. It was a mistake no one would make again.